Hello, everybody. Today we're going to look at comparison and contrast. That means we're looking for similarities, things that are similar, and differences, things that are different. Let's take a look and see how texts do that. First of all, when we want to focus on similarities, we look at what is the same. Well, here we can see it's the same kind of car. We see that it has wheels and similar windows. However, when we want to contrast, we focus on the differences. And here we can see that the difference is in the color. So when we compare or in comparison, the focus is on the similarities. When we contrast, the focus is on the difference or the differences. Let's look at this text. Sign languages, the communication systems developed by deaf people, have a great deal in common with spoken languages. So here we already see that it's going to talk about similarities. Have in common. In common is a marker that shows us that we're going to read about something that's similar. Signers communicate at a speed similar to that of native speakers. Research has also shown that sign languages and spoken languages cause the same areas of the brain to become active. So when we look at our text, we see in common, similar to, the same. It's focusing on similarities. What's similar? Sign languages and spoken languages. So when we look at another text, we want to see something and see how it compares. The backgrounds and experiences of today's immigrants to the U.S. are different from those of the 19th century immigrants. So right away we see different from. That's going to show us that the focus is going to be on contrast, the differences. Unlike, again, differences. Unlike the earlier immigrants who were almost all from Europe, the majority of the contemporary immigrants come from Asia and Latin America. So in the past they were from Europe, and today from Asia and Latin America. Instead of, again, we have a marker that immediately shows us that there's a difference. Instead of moving into their own ethnic neighborhoods in the inner city, as the 19th century Europeans did, many of today's immigrants favor middle-class suburbs. So what's different? In the past, they moved into the inner city in ethnic neighborhoods, and today they're moving into middle-class suburbs. And again, what are we comparing today or contrasting here? Today's immigrants and 19th century immigrants. Sometimes we can see that it's organized in a different way. Let's take a look at this. The backgrounds and experiences of today's immigrants to the U.S. are different from those of the 19th century immigrants. Unlike the earlier immigrants who were all from Europe, the majority of contemporary immigrants come from Asia and Latin America. Again, we have the same information, but it's organized in a different way. Instead of moving to their own ethnic neighborhoods, they favor middle-class suburbs. And again, we're looking at today's immigrants and 19th century immigrants. And if we want to mark things, we can do it this way. We can see this is the way it was in one time, and here it is another time. Today's the earlier immigrants, and it tells us all about the earlier immigrants. They were European, and they settled in their own ethnic neighborhoods. Contemporary immigrants, and then we have a part of the text that tells us about that they're from Asia and Latin America, and that they're settling in middle-class suburbs. So what that means is that we need to pay attention to the organization of the information. And of course, pay attention to comparison markers, comparisons, equivalence, resemblance, similarity, the verbs to compare, to resemble, adjectives, connectors. We need to pay attention to all of these words when we're reading, and when we read them, mark them in some way. Underline, highlight, circle, and ask yourself, is it comparing? Is it talking about similarities? Or is it talking about differences? And contrast markers, again, here we have a list. And we look at this list. We have nouns, we have verbs, adjectives, and the connectors. Lots and lots of connectors. But, however, in contrast to, instead of, in theory and in practice, on the one hand, on the other hand, all of these words show us that there's going to be something that's in contrast. We need to mark and pay attention to them. And then sometimes we have to stop and say, okay, how do we organize that information? How do we take notes while we're reading? And we write things down. So we can make a table like this, with different things. We could have, for example, today's immigrants, past immigrants, where they settled, and where they came from. And if we want to show similarities and differences, we can use a Venn diagram where what's similar is here in the middle, and what's different is in the other part of the circle. And now it's time for you to practice. Have fun.